Perspective-based indie puzzlers feel like they're becoming common enough to almost be their own weirdly specific subgenre. But here comes Etherborn to show that an obscene level of polish can still make previously explored ground feel fresh and vibrant again. Etherborn's concept probably sounds at least somewhat familiar. Take a bunch of tightly constructed 3D spaces that ignore the rules of physics and let the player figure out how to navigate their way through them. In Etherborn's case, every puzzle is its own little 3D planetoid, but so long as you walk on a curved surface, you can defy gravity and transition from one side to another. A simple idea maybe, but one that they've polished until it shined. So, let's check out how far that polish takes it. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today we're defying gravity in Etherborn. Sharp presentation is the name of the game here. Visuals, audio, controls, everything in this game is just tight. The landscapes you're exploring are gorgeous, the soundtrack is memorable and easy listening, and there's a ton of technical stuff under the hood here coming together to make this game work as well as it does. In particular, I am deeply impressed by this game's camera work. It's no small surprise that in a game like this, having a dynamic camera that can flit around as you move from face to face of a puzzle is essential. But my god, does Etherborn's camera work overtime. And it makes it look easy, too. Sometimes, the way it frames the action accidentally tells you where to go to progress in a particular puzzle, but the trade-off is that it feels like somebody went through the entire game and manually handpicked the most optimal position for the camera to be for every single frame. I can imagine a million different ways this camera could have ruined the entire experience, especially because you personally don't have much control over it. But it always highlights exactly what you need to look at while creating some really gorgeous shots in the process. It's hard to watch it track you for 2 minutes as you run through the tutorial and not be impressed. If nothing else, this camera is probably the coolest and most impressive feat Etherborn accomplishes. But how's the gameplay? Well, Etherborn is never outright bad or unfun, but some of its puzzles stand out noticeably more than others, to the point where some of its worlds blew my mind, while others were just kind of pretty and okay to walk through. Your goal is to find these little glowing MacGuffins. The game never gave them a name, so I'm just gonna call them engrams because, well, look at them. So Etherborn tucks these engrams in different corners of the map, and your entire objective is to figure out the convoluted path to reach them, then bring them back to power a bridge or an elevator or something else along those lines. Very simple objective, but it gets more complicated once you start looking at the execution. See, every location you explore is this little 3D Rubik's Cube, and the engrams are almost never on the same plane as you are. Gravity also works a little funny here. If you walk off a sharp 90-degree ledge, you fall like normal, but if you walk on a curved hinge, you transition from one plane to another. And in doing so, you can stick to the side of an object or even stand upside down, and gravity will still treat you like you're right side up on solid ground. To be honest, the actual gameplay itself is incredibly simple, just some light platforming. It's the level design that does all the work here. The real challenge of Etherborn is coming to understand these weird 3D spaces that our brains aren't quite wired to parse, and the more complex and intricate they are, the more engrossing they become. And to understand what I'm talking about, check me out running through this one section where you go through the same room multiple times. And the deeper you get into this puzzle, the more times this same familiar space gets recontextualized, and you discover a whole new layer to it you never even noticed before. My mind was blown by this section, and how many different ways this one tiny space gets recontextualized. Not every puzzle in Etherborn is nearly this good, but moments like this one are the high points that make this game memorable. And while this is one micro example, the game as a whole follows this ethos, focusing on fewer puzzles, but having you spend more time with each one. Each world in Etherborn only really has 2 or 3 islands that you go to, but each one will consume a good 5 to 20 minutes of your time as you explore and really come to know them, crisscrossing each region multiple times to accomplish your goals. But it's time to ask, what do you get out of 5 hours with Etherborn? 2 is enough to finish the game, but after you're done with that, there's a New Game Plus mode that puts all the puzzle pieces in different locations, and that took me another 2 on top. That said, these levels were really hand-tailored for the first run, and so unsurprisingly, the New Game Plus levels that try to offer new challenges with the same maps can be a little hit or miss, and you're safe skipping them if you want. But regardless of how much you decide to play, you can pretty much see everything Etherborn has to offer in 5 hours, and that's exactly what we look for here. But if it wasn't clear by now, Etherborn is a game that impresses me on a technical level more than anything else. Even as I endeavored to wrap my head around the spaces I was exploring, I couldn't help but wonder how the hell you even put such tight and disorienting little puzzle boxes together in reverse. Nothing about this concept lends itself well to readability, and there are 100 ways it could have devolved into an incomprehensible mess. But that never happened. The sheer marvel that they managed to pull it off is impressive on its own. But the question remains, where does this leave the average player that isn't a massive nerd about camera angles and production processes like I am, and just wants to play something fun? And the answer to that is that Etherborn has some flashes of brilliance where it feels truly special, but for the most part it's just a beautiful, tightly constructed game. And overall, that means it's still a solid contender for your afternoon. If you're looking for more nifty puzzle games, check out my review of Ethereal. Or you can check out my quarterly wrap-ups, almost all of which feature at least one puzzle game or another. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. If you did, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. If you're looking for games that value your time and don't pad themselves, I'm your guy. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.